so I'm delighted to welcome Meloni, who's joining us today on the next episode of our Data Center Direction podcast. So welcome, Meloni.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Happy to be in London.
I know. Thanks for. I know you visited family over here, aren't you? So, So obviously we want to discuss kind of the future of the data center market. This is what the podcast is all kind of aimed for. So, do you want to tell us a little about your experience in the construction data center world to begin with?
Absolutely. So I do data center construction and development, and I've been working with most of the major hyperscalers for the past 10 years. So I've built hyperscale data centers for Microsoft, Google, Facebook at the time, Meta, and AWS, Amazon Web Services. But before that, I had my intro to mission critical work working for the Department of Aviation in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah.
So the city of Atlanta owns Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, which is the world's most busiest airport in the world.
Yes, I know that.
Yeah, and I found myself, had got a contract there, and they needed somebody that had technology experience, kind of network engineering, network architecture experience, and also construction experience. And at the time, this was like about almost 15 years ago, that was a niche market that not many people had, that mission critical market, that, you had to work under, constraints as far as like these were operational spaces. We still had passengers. We still had planes that were taking off and landing all day long. And anything that you had to do with the infrastructure, you had to make sure that it was up when the passengers were there, and when the passengers weren't there, which was like maybe a 4-hour period at night, is when you could get the bulk of your work done. And then you had to make sure it was up again in the morning. So that really prepared me, and I didn't know it at the time, for my work that I'd be doing in the data center space, because it's very similar.
Yeah. Obviously, there's a lot of transferable skills. So you began your career in the data center world about 10 years ago. Yeah. And I suppose, how do you think like the market has evolved over that period ultimately? I know it's kind of evolves all the time, but how do you feel like it's evolved over that period?
Well, I would say, so kind of my edge data center experience started with the Department of Aviation. So I was doing data centers there, IDF, MDF rooms that controlled the major technology components of the airport, as well as their wireless systems and their distributed antenna systems. So kind of started with the edge data centers there, but on the hyperscale experience, that's where I kind of got my start with the hyperscalers. And I would say that it's definitely evolved in that the hyperscalers are building a lot faster now, whereas we would see a 2 to 3 year turnaround on a data center. The hyperscalers now are competing to get them done in as little as 18 months, if possible. So definitely seeing the demand to go bigger, to go faster, to go more vertical. And definitely seeing how constrained the market has become because of that scale that we've been moving.
Yeah, well, the market's exploded, hasn't it, over the past 3 to 4 years, obviously. And where do you see it kind of going over the next 3 to 5 years? What do you feel like? We talk about the constraints. I think everyone knows power, cooling, staffing, etc. is all massive constraints to where the market can go. But where do you feel like it'll evolve over the coming years, say in 5 years' time? What do you feel like the market would look like then?
So I definitely think that we're starting to see a shift, right? Because the hyperscalers are understanding now that they cannot keep up with technology. This pace at which you can physically build a building is always going to be a slower pace than technology, right? So what you have to do is, when you plan your design, you have to plan with that 5 to 10 year future in mind. So you're not just necessarily building for that particular data center customer and their requirements and demands at that time, but what their demands would look like within the next 5 years. So you've got to have enough white space in the building to where you'll be able to expand your computing, be able to expand your electrical rooms. So you may have some underutilized space or rooms within these data centers, but that'll be for a short amount of time so that it will allow your data center client to expand. You also need to start looking at, and I think we all know that the data centers take a lot of power, but there has to be scalability within that power, right? So a lot of the hyperscalers are looking to move towards kind of off grid energy,
Yeah.
kind of doing some power, creating their own grids pretty much, and not having to use the utilities. Because I think that we're seeing that the utilities are constrained, and that's really kind of what starts the constraints within the data center space. But we'll have to look at creative ways of being able to generate power. So the data center has to generate the power that it needs. Also, getting into creative ways for cooling.
Yeah.
So, whereas we see a lot of the data centers are in that, in the US, they're in that Northern Virginia, Midwest area. I think that we'll start to see them kind of shifting and going a little bit further north as well, just from a cooling capacity
Yeah.
alone. Because number one, yes, you have the space in that area, because so it's not, you'll have like more like land, so you'll
Yeah.
be able to build bigger, but you also will have a cooler climate. And as we see technology is evolving and AI is kind of, the demand for AI is still booming
Yeah.
exponentially, we're going to need to get creative about cooling. So, yes, we've got liquid cooling, but you're going to need to really implement more of the free air cooling and liquid cooling in order to keep up with the capacity that we're going to need for AI.
Yeah.
Liquid cooling alone is not going to do it. I know that some companies are looking at direct to chip, cooling.
Yeah.
And there's companies that do in-row heat exchangers, and then you have chillers. But really being able to utilize a data center that's in a cooler climate overall. So you've got longer during the year to where you can use the free air cooling. And then maybe you can even look at some sustainability measures where the heat that you are generating, you're able to kind of push that into like a distribution system. So maybe you're able to use that to heat part of the town or
Yeah.
homes or
Yeah.
buildings or things like that.
Yeah.
So I definitely think it's changing where you're going to start seeing like these sub markets pop up. So the hubs that we've normally seen, like the Texas, and the Virginia, and some areas out in the West, they're going to start to dissipate, and you're going to see like these sub regions pop up. And I can definitely see us moving a little bit further north to
Yeah,
take
yeah,
advantage of
take
that
the
cooling.
cooling. Yeah, yeah. So I think that's obviously a massive constraint, is it, on the market evolving. But like you said, obviously, technology is advancing. Probably, so if your facilities being built in 18 months, the technology needs to be looking 5 years down the line, doesn't it? Because the investment is so big that you
Hmm.
need to make sure that it's not going to be a 2 to 3 year facility ultimately.
Right.
Is that what you're kind of seeing in the market, basically?
Yeah, definitely. And then I think, if you kind of need to scale up quickly, I know that there's some hyperscalers that are looking at doing buildings that maybe are less involved. And there's a couple of hyperscalers that are doing tents and some modular
Yeah.
buildings. I always say that the buildings themselves, the actual construction from like the ground up, is really not the longest pole in the tent when it comes to building data centers. Most of the time, it's the long lead equipment that you have,
Yeah.
and those, the supply chain within those manufacturers being able to keep up with the demand. So we all need the transformers. We all have medium voltage. We all have UPS backup. We all have the PDUs, and there's only a limited amount of companies that are
Yeah,
making
yeah,
that equipment for
yeah,
every single data center, whether it's a hyperscaler or an edge data center.
yeah,
They're making them for everyone, and we're definitely starting to see that that's where the crunch is coming in. So whether you say you want to do a modular building or a tent, you can get that up as fast as you need to, but the inner workings, the mechanisms, the electrical components and the mechanical components that you need to run the data center, that's where we definitely see that there's a small amount of people and companies that are available to do that.
yeah. I think that's the big thing, isn't it? And I've had a couple of other guests who've talked about that kind of manufacturing distribution kind of thing. That's where things are being delayed in that process.
Hmm.
You're having to get secondary suppliers and things like that to make
Yeah.
sure that that facility's got to be built on time. But that's usually the thing that ultimately can dictate it extended, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then even within those suppliers, you may have multiple suppliers, but funny enough, those suppliers, their raw material is coming from the same
Yeah,
guy.
exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
So it's like, yeah, you're kind of like, well, let's distribute the wealth and go and have, multiple suppliers for our piping and our conduit and our racking systems and our transformers. But then like you come up with this one component, this gasket, or some sort of flange that everyone is using the same manufacturer for that one piece, and
yeah,
that one piece is what is holding up the production line.
yeah.
So that's what I found in a lot of these cases. A lot of them are using the same raw material manufacturer.
Yeah, and obviously there's delays, globally in terms
Oh
of
yeah.
shipping and that all obviously then passes on to the delay in the data center. Ultimately, if manufacturing supplies are short. So, what do you think? I suppose from a leader perspective, been leading projects and data centers for a number of years. What do you feel like the biggest challenge is as a leader in the industry right now?
I think the biggest challenge is really kind of building strategically from all angles. What we have found is that if you are, whether you're a developer, you're a hyperscaler, you're all pulling from the same resources. So when I say resources, I'm not just talking about the power and the cooling, but also the resources, and really wanting to go faster and go bigger, but also kind of understanding the limitations. I think probably making better use of looking at a longer term strategy. Like I was saying, like making sure that you're building for the customer's potential
Yeah,
demand in the future, to try to eliminate the constraints that we have. So if you're able to build it ahead of time, then maybe you won't have to bring in as many electricians, as many HVAC technicians, because you've already provided that
yeah,
framework up
yeah,
front, because the market for that is just going to continue to be constrained. So I think that, looking at it from a leader perspective, long term overall, the whole life cycle of the data center build. Also from a leadership perspective, one of the things that I try to really stay connected with my construction roots, and I think that in data center development, it's very easy to get caught up with the demand, right? Keeping up with the demand, making sure that we're turning over these data centers and these data halls and these rooms as quickly as possible to our clients so that we can start billing. Well, that's great, but at the core of construction, you've actually got people, right?
yeah,
So, and this is not human resources like tech firms. A lot of the hyperscalers are really just technology companies. They
yeah,
may try to they may build their own buildings, but they're not construction companies.
yeah,
And so their thought process behind scaling and being agile, it's very hard to translate that into construction,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
You can only be as agile as the human body
yeah.
in
Exactly,
construction.
exactly.
So that's one of the things that I look at from a leadership perspective is, yes, what can we do to speed up the delivery, the capacity delivery, but also being realistic into what can we deliver safely.
Yeah,
Because for me, safety does equal schedule. Safety means on time. Safety means on budget, right?
yeah,
Safety means a successful project. And if we're not putting that at the forefront, because this is still construction, right?
yeah,
We've
yeah,
got to put
yeah,
that at the forefront, where I feel like a lot of leaders put the delivery for the demand at the forefront.
yeah.
And you can have a project that you want to deliver in 18 months, but if you have one fatality, your 18-month schedule is
Yeah,
out the door.
exactly, exactly. I think, like you said, though, like with the hyperscalers, they are fundamentally tech
Yeah,
companies
there's the companies.
building a piece of software. An
Right.
enterprise piece of software is completely different from building a
Yep.
hyperscale data center facility. Like you said, there are different, it's the same in some ways the same concept. You've got a project, you want to get it on time, in budget, etc. But there's obviously more manual labour involved,
Right.
definitely in a construction projects, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, and obviously we reference technology. What do you feel? Which technology feel like are going to have the biggest impact on the data center market as a whole?
Well, I think for data center market, so as far as the capacity delivery and just the need for data centers, I think it's going to continue to be AI,
Yeah,
and just the expansion of AI. that we've seen over the past 5 years, that's definitely, not slowing down at all.
Yeah.
A lot more companies are getting into that AI space. So we're going to see some emerging tech companies that maybe are not even on the map right now
Yeah.
that are going to become big contenders within the next 5 years. So we've got to start thinking about that, especially from a colo perspective. So a lot of these hyperscalers don't only build for their AI capacity, they also build for external customers, right?
Yeah.
And being prepared for the demand of those external customers that we don't even know exist right now. I think that's one of the things that we've got to really keep an eye on. And then when I look at technology, just from a building perspective, being able to integrate AI into the way that we do building.
Yeah.
Historically, construction has been very antiquated and has been, kind of shied away from keeping up to date with technology
Yeah.
and AI. And I think that integrating a lot of that, we've got building information modeling, BIM, utilizing that, doing more virtual 3D walkthroughs, doing more class detection, making that like the baseline for your scheduling and your quality control. Being able to do some of your commissioning off site. So being able to do L2, L3s before it even gets on site. So once you kind of install, you do some preliminary checks and then you're able to roll right into your L4 and L5 IST testing. Those things are going to be helpful. And I think that incorporating AI into more of what we do on a day-to-day basis as constructors
Yeah.
is going to need to happen in order for us to keep up with the demand of AI. Funny
Well,
enough.
and I was going to say it's quite the irony, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
That we're building these facilities for AI usage. So, in the construction market, it's been, I wouldn't say it's archaic, but in terms of like facilitating technology within that, it's obviously been slower than other sectors, right? I think it has to evolve in that to make, because the demand is, like you said, the demand's gone from 3 years to 18 months. They're gonna want it delivering even quicker or larger, etc. You have to utilize technology in the space to enable, like you said, doing things off site is all going to enable the project to be finished in a faster, more efficient time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then even workforce development,
Yeah.
being able to have the people that are skilled enough to build these data centers, to do the testing on all of the gear that goes within data centers. I mean, in the U.S., there's like a small subset of people within the construction industry that have that experience. We literally all know each other. I always say every time I go on another project, I'm working with somebody that I worked on another data center project with, or they worked with somebody that I know. But we're going to be aging out of this,
I
soon,
know.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, who is the next generation that's going to be keep up with this scale? Because we're all kind of coming into it as it's ramping up, right?
Yeah.
It's still not at its peak. What is that going to look like? And what are we doing to make sure that we've got the resources to support that?
Yeah, and I think that's obviously I think there's loads of data out there that suggests like, there's an extra 400,000 workers needed in the US this year. That's outside of obviously the demand there is now. So where's the labour going to come from? And then obviously, there are external factors that will affect that, the lack of maybe visas being able to be sponsored into the US, etc. So
big.
Exactly, which people obviously, it has some ramifications and stuff like that. But when you're talking of a massive labour shortage, you either have to educate very quickly. You have to look at just, people who maybe aren't just finishing college and, maybe are in another role currently, how to entice them into the data center world. Because, some of the older generation are going to leave the industry, right? They're going to retire, etc. So that is going to be a big challenge for the industry, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Funny enough that you touched on the visa, we can go right into the geopolitical, how that plays into the data center market, because you're absolutely right. Data centers, the leaders in data centers are going to be not only where they've got the infrastructure, the power, and the cooling capabilities, but also how can they easily get these resources that we need? There are resources throughout the world, but if you're in a region where it's hard for people to get visas to work in, governments are really going to have to look at that, because at some point you're going to be constrained by that, right? And the regions that don't have as many hurdles with that are probably going to see more resources and more skilled resources available to work on their projects. So,
Yeah.
all of that kind of plays in together.
Yeah. So do you feel like that may lead to, obviously, the US has the the number one player in this
Hmm.
market, but do you feel like that may, if the geopolitical changes don't come into effect, do you feel like that may be in other markets that start emerging globally? Is that what you're saying,
Oh yeah,
basically?
I
Yeah.
definitely can see other markets
Yeah.
emerging, and I think that there's definitely a lot of markets that are untapped. I mean, smaller countries that have the land availability, that
Yeah.
have that implemented sustainability goals, that have hydropower. They've got a good, strong infrastructure. I mean, countries like Norway that we don't even really think
Yeah.
about,
Yeah.
Canada, where the hyperscalers are building in Canada on a lot slower
Yeah.
pace. But I can definitely see Canada emerging as like
Yeah, I was going to
that's
say
yeah.
because obviously in them kind of northern countries, the
Hmm.
Nordics, you've got Finland,
Yep. Yeah.
Norway, etc. You have got that element of, like you said, natural cooling, haven't you?
Yep.
Same with Canada,
Yep.
colder
Absolutely.
climate,
And
etc.
then, like I said, the geopolitical climate. It's a
Yeah.
lot easier to get visas to work in those countries,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
exactly. We've done a lot of work recruitment in the Nordics, and know they're
Hmm.
much more friendly about different people going to work there, etc. Is
Yeah.
much more easier to get a visa,
Hmm.
which then means ultimately, because I don't think that is the number one factor at the moment
Right.
for businesses. I
Right.
don't think they're thinking where's is there a labour shortage, just like where's the best place to build. But
Right.
ultimately, that is going to have to have a big impact over the coming years, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, you're gonna have to look at that. Like, I
Yeah,
mean, so that's what I'm saying. Like, from a strategy point of view,
yeah,
leaders have to look at the whole, right?
yeah,
We also have to look at the tariffs that are in place, right? We're importing a lot of these components for these data centers. We're
yeah,
not manufacturing them here. We don't want to price ourselves out of being able to build data centers either,
yeah,
right? I mean, the gear, the chips are one thing, right? That's expensive on the operating side, but the gear that it takes to support these data centers are all imported,
yeah,
right? And so we also need to look at that. So not only the time is it taking to get things cleared in customs, but the cost, right? So there is going to come a time where we're going to see, like, we've got to start putting some things in place at a federal level in the
yeah,
United States to be able to continue to be that major player in the data center space, so that we don't, get shut out. And we've seen how the U.S. can get shut out in manufacturing and
yeah.
technology, right? Just by not, by having certain restrictions in place.
Yeah.
So we're definitely going to have to take a look at that if we're planning on just continue to be a leader in the data
Yeah,
center
yeah, I think it's
infrastructure.
really important, like you said, because there's, I think at the moment the time element is more, in some ways, factored in more than the money. How quickly can we get it
Hmm.
delivered, etc. But that the money side is going to have to come. There can't be keeping this huge investments and things like that. I feel like you said, like labour shortages now in the US are bigger than ever. So they are going to have to solve some big challenges to
Right.
enable the US to be that dominant player over the coming years.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And I suppose, like, which industry assumption do you feel like is fundamentally wrong right now, and what impact is that having?
I think that, again, I think that probably goes into wanting to build quickly.
Yeah.
We've That's one thing that industry is. If you think about data centers, every single data center developer, hyperscaler, they're looking at how can we go to market faster.
Yeah.
And I know that that's going to come back to bite us, because we've got to look at the sustainability goals that these companies also have. There's going to be a time where, they're going to be contradicting themselves, because if you are not building at scale and then also building in renewable energy sources at the same time, you're effectively going to be building yourself out of availability.
Yeah.
And at what point does that happen? So there's a lot of companies that are looking to do partnerships with the local utility companies, which is definitely great. How can you generate more electricity more is sustainable, right? So you don't want to, you want to make sure that you're leaving the earth in a better place than when you were there, leaving it better than you found it, and making sure that you are not constraining yourself by your sustainability goals, but then also not having this increased burden on emissions and things like that. So I think that those are some of the things that we've kind of got to change the narrative
Yeah.
about, like, yes, we want to move quickly and deliver capacity quickly, but the scaling of that capacity needs to be looked at from a holistic point of view. So scaling up the resources, scaling up your natural resources, scaling up the renewable resources, scaling up your human resources,
Yeah.
and trying to be a little bit more strategic in how those all play together.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's that is a very fine balance, isn't it? Because everybody wants things yesterday, don't they? Nobody's probably thinking 3 to 5 years down the line in some because they're worried that then they're going to miss out on the opportunity, aren't they? In some respects, so it's kind of it's difficult to put yourself in that position. But I know some of the hyperscalers are doing some great initiatives. I think around training future generations and labour shortages, aren't they? Ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of workforce development programs that the hyperscalers have employed now, that they've got a lot of data center operator courses. I know that they're partnering with trade schools to get people interested again in electrical trades and plumbing.
Yeah.
And I guess, what this newer generation doesn't realize is, if you look at the demand in the US for, 6-figure top dollar careers at this point, a lot of them don't even need a 4-year degree.
Yeah.
Most of them need you to learn a skill and need you to learn a trade. And that's going to create like this next wave of millionaires, honestly. So it's like technology is running neck and neck now with the blue collar jobs.
Yeah, I was
because
about
the
to
blue
say
collar
that.
jobs
Yeah.
are supporting technology.
Yeah.
And so it's like, that's what I always call myself the technology GC. I'm at that intersection where it's like, I'm supporting the technology of the future, and that can't be done without the builders.
Yeah. I think I've been in both industries, construction, technology, and I think I think the construction side, the electrical side, the plumbing side is maybe even a more safer. No one knows how maybe more safer career than technology. AI, yes, going to have a massive impact on technology, on construction,
Right.
but are we at a point where somebody's going to ultimately be, you're going to get someone that's going to be able to, wire things in or plumb things in at this stage? I'm unsure, where there's obviously a lot of AI coding tools that are coming into the market, etc. So I actually think in terms of like labour demand and obviously from a talent perspective, I think, like you said, the blue collar roles will ultimately you'll see more money in them roles over the coming years, personally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of the way to go. It's funny. I was talking to a technology company CEO, and it's funny. His company has evolved, and he's doing more structured cabling for hyperscalers now, where he's a network engineering guy. So he's usually kind of dealing with maybe racking and stacking and doing some programming behind the scenes. And he says, I wear a hard hat and jeans more than I wear my suit and tie now.
Yeah.
And he's like, and I've literally grown my business like 10 times as large as it was 10 years ago, just on being able to get into more of that construction technology space. And I was like, remember I told you about that? I'm like, I need a percentage, because
Exactly.
I told you.
Do you get equity?
I told you that's the direction that it was going to go in.
Yeah.
So I've always been comfortable playing in that space. It's like, I can put my hard hat on, because I already knew I could see it, 10, 15 years ago. Like I always say there's more wires in wireless than people think. Wireless technology is all powered by fiber cables, conduits.
Just because you can't see it in your home.
Right. And so I was doing that side of the technology for the airports, and people were like, oh, this Wi-Fi is fantastic. And I'm like, yeah, we just had about 1,000 people actually putting in all of the infrastructure that's supporting you
To
being
be
able
able
to
to
take
do
your
that,
laptop
yeah.
and stream 4K video.
And I think that I often try and talk about that, the message that needs to, there's obviously a lot of factors in data centers where, the environment, etc., and obviously there's political factors of data centers not actually being put into production. But I don't think enough is talked about in terms of what the infrastructure actually does for the day-to-day person. Do you know
Right.
what I mean? Like your Wi-Fi in an airport,
Yeah.
how do you get that? Do you know what I mean? How can you work from home?
Yeah, I
You
tell
know?
people that all the time.
Yeah,
It's kind of taboo right now. It's like some people are indifferent about data centers. I wouldn't say I've met anybody that actually doesn't work in data centers that are thrilled about data centers, but there's some people that are indifferent and there's some people who are like completely against
yeah,
it. These are the same people that are using social media every day.
I know.
These are the same people who do all their banking online.
Yeah.
The same people who are generating AI cartoons or using ChatGPT like their therapist.
Well, to work, I think
So yeah,
many of us use
yeah,
ChatGPT
just
or similar
yeah, to
tools.
write emails. I mean, all of
Exactly.
them, the Copilot, the ChatGPT, the Claude, the Gemini, all of those things people are using, and I'm just like, do you understand that the reason that you're able to the way that you're able
Yeah.
to use this, and it's so fast and it's changing your life and it's making it a lot easier for you to write papers and finish school and finish your work,
Yeah.
is because of the data center infrastructure that's supporting all of that.
Yeah.
So again, it's people are not, they don't see those wires, they don't see all of that. They're like, well, we don't need any more data centers. Well, then I just tell people, well, we'll go back to writing letters and putting them in the mail.
Exactly.
Not have any tracking. It's not mail with tracking. Mail
Yeah.
regular postage mail, and you just have to pray it gets there in about 7 to 10 days.
Yeah.
So we really don't realize how much data centers support our everyday single life, even healthcare. If you go, we have a lot of virtual healthcare now. If you got like a common cold, you just call on the phone, do a video
Yeah.
visit.
Yeah.
You don't have to leave your house and things like that. I mean, that's all going somewhere. That's all supported by
I
data
know.
centers.
I think that's where the industry does need to do more to communicate that message. I think to the the outside
Right.
community, because they don't understand that. And I think if as leaders in the market, everybody needs to kind of take that responsibility.
Right.
Going into speaking in schools, colleges, etc. Talking about how great a career it is, but also talking about why we need these in society and the
Yeah.
usage that they're there for. That's really important. So I think, like, what would you say is like a risk in the, current data center growth model that's maybe not talked about?
I think the risk is not building for that future capacity.
Yeah.
Like we've got to be able to, if you're going to put this much time and money into a building, you should be able to utilize that building and expand for like at least 5 to 10 years. So what does the trajectory again of that client's capacity requirements look like? Not just from the day that you launch it, that's great, but how can they scale within that? That's definitely a big risk, because then what you'll have and what people worry about is just having a bunch of data centers that are antiquated.
Yeah.
You definitely don't want that. You want to be able to have infrastructure that supports multiple cooling options.
Yeah.
So maybe you start as air cooled, but you put in infrastructure. You've got enough space. You build in enough space to be able to go to a liquid cooling at some point in time, or you do some sort of mix, a hybrid approach. In the beginning, so that you're able to support different types of computing power as that change and as the change and the need would dictate.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the risk that I see right now, is that a lot of times I find that we're building for the right now. We're building for the demand of the customer. So the customer needs a data center in a year, and this is the capacity that we need. Well, what does their capacity look like in 10 years? And will this this $1 billion building that we're building, can it support that level of growth?
Yeah.
I think that a lot of the data center developers and hyperscalers would be really surprised to see that the infrastructure is not there to support what we need in 10 years.
Yeah, and like you said, then it's going to need to be redesigned or
Redesigned, new buildings, um, things like that. Like we've got to really look at not just what we're, not building to the design, but like really designing to like the future building needs.
yeah. And how, I suppose it leads on to how would you make kind of infrastructure decisions today that won't become constraints in 5 years?
Space,
Yeah,
right? So if you're building on a piece of land and you're not able to go vertical because there's some air rights rules or things like that, that's definitely going to be a constraint. If you are, building in a place that, you don't have enough land to to expand, if you have to do some ancillary buildings, that's going to become a constraint. Also, not having enough edge data centers. So we're really focused on these huge campus clusters, but also how are we integrating them into edge data centers that are a little bit closer to the needs of the end user. I
yeah.
think those are some of the risks that we're looking at right now.
Yeah, so you need you ultimately you're having to make that decision, aren't you? Ultimately on
Right.
where we're going to be in 5-10 years, even
Mm-hmm.
today, because like you said, I think the technology is evolving. We're speaking to someone over last week and they're saying the technology evolving. If I set my data centers today to be built in 18 months, the technology is past that in 18
Yeah.
months time. So we're kind of like, we need to think of where that's going to be,
Right.
because otherwise we're going to be kind of left short, aren't we,
Right.
ultimately?
And what I find is that some of the hyperscalers are are trying to be agile with that capacity delivery, but again, it's difficult to be agile when you've got people and actual materials and equipment that are needed to build this, right?
Yeah,
So you've really got to have a strong core design up front that already has that outlook of this is what we need to be doing, so that we're building to that future and not just building towards the capacity that we may have already sold and have a client for,
yes,
right?
exactly. Yeah, yeah. I suppose finally, if you had to redesign a data center from scratch today, knowing what you know now, what would you maybe do differently ultimately?
I would probably spend a little bit more time on the design and looking at the strategy for power and water resiliency,
Yeah,
human resource resiliency as well, and start looking at some of those emerging markets that I think that in those emerging markets we've got political climates where a lot of the governments in those emerging markets are open and welcome to additional tax dollars
yeah,
coming into those spaces. They've maybe not too far from a local metropolitan area, so you've got enough resources. But I think definitely being strategic in making sure that you've got multiple options. So you either got options to do air cool, liquid cooling, in-row cooling, direct-to-chip cooling. What does that all look like from a design perspective?
yeah,
Making sure that any of these long lead items that they are ordered and procured really once the design is completed.
yeah,
So you should have all of those things procured and have delivery dates at your design,
yeah,
right? And really kind of start looking at the data center delivery from like a design build perspective, like taking it back to my days of residential and commercial construction, where you get the whole ecosystem in the room, and you all say, okay, this is what we need to build, and everybody's got they've got kind of a say so in how it gets built, and
yeah,
kind of they're going to work their production because they know that this is coming, that this is what's needed for the design, to be able to facilitate this production. Then you've got the landowners, and then you bring to the table the end user client as well.
yeah,
So all of your designers, your contractors, your GC, having your GC on board with the design and actually doing a true design build. So every step along the way, even before you send out that NTP, that notice to proceed, sign that contract with the GC, all of the players are set in place. Everybody knows what their role is in the delivery of the project, and they're starting to work on that ahead of time.
yeah,
I think that is one of the biggest strategies that I can see is we're going to need to move towards that design build in order to get these delivered faster.
yeah. unfortunately, because I think, like we know today, unfortunately, with tube strikes in London, so we're out of time. But it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. We could have probably stayed and talked for another hour or two, I'm
Yes,
sure.
yes.
But a massive thanks to you. I know you're a massive advocate of the industry. You do a lot to promote kind of women in construction, etc. So I'm sure we'll see you as a leader over the years to come. But thanks so much for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.